Good morning, everyone. This is Sylvia McCroy with Christian Parenting Today. I hope that you will bear with us. We have been having some issues with the volume, so we're trying to get those resolved, but I will try to speak louder until we get those handled. For today's book review, I'm going to review my very first book. And that one's entitled An Inside Look at Education, What No One Told Us and How It Is Impacting Our Children. And this is the cover. You can find it on our website, Christian Parenting Today. Also, if you want to drop me an email, I will be sure to get that to you as well. I think these sell for about $14, $14.99, something like that. This one, my email is christianparentingtoday1@gmail.com. So let me get started with this book and some of the information, because I have been meeting with a lot of homeschoolers, but I know there's a lot of people that are public school. And so I just wanted to give you some insight and a little preview of what is in the book. So the first thing that I want to share with you is we need to remember that it is not the school's job to educate our children. They are a resource to add to it. We are the educators of our children. We need to filter what is being fed into them, and we need to add to that. But we can't just walk away and hand our kids over to the schools and the school system and let them take control of our children. Now, I can say this because I'm a retired teacher. I taught in public school, and I have taught grades 4 through 8 in the public school. I have taught preschool, and I have taught at the community college. So I have a very wide, vast knowledge of what's going on in the schools and their limits. So please do not expect them to be completely responsible for the education of your children. With that said, I want to share with you, and I have this in my book, but I want to share with you Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy chapter 11, verses 18 and 19, it says, "Imprint these words of mine on your hearts and minds. Bind them as a sign on your hands, and let them be a symbol on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit in your house and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up." Christians today, we tend to overlook how important it is to constantly be teaching our children, and that being our job. Now, let me go back to this, and I am talking from experience and from observation. Let me tell you, parenting is hard. It is very hard. It is harder for you than it was for me. So I come from a heart of, I understand what you're going through, and I understand that your job is much harder than mine was. But guys, this is what I want you to think about, and especially as Christians, and this is very, very hard, especially in today's world. But please think about what your ultimate purpose is for your children. Do you want them to be educated for worldly, material goods? Do you want them to have the wealth of the earth, the earthly wealth, or do you want them to have the heavenly wealth? We need to, first of all, decide that. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't improve their education. By all means, no, I am not saying that. What I am saying is we need to keep our focus and our focus needs to always be on God and heaven. It should not get so muddied with what we see in society that we soon lose that and it's replaced by greed and wealth. So be careful with that. So one of the things I've done, and I encourage you to do this too, and I know that I'm talking to some teachers today as well, and I also know, and thank you people from other countries, that I am talking to people from other countries. And I've got to say, a lot of people in other countries are doing a much, much better job of educating children than we are in the United States. The United States used to be one of the top in education, and it seems like each year we are going down in the ladder. So I made a list of the things that were good in education, in public education, and the problems that we are having. So some of the things that I listed as being good is there are more tools available for children in the U.S. The U.S. has experienced a lot of wealth, even though we're going through a tough economic time. For the most part, we have experienced a lot of wealth that we are able to pass on. So children have those available. And now I am seeing that parents are more involved in their children's lives than ever before. Now, this can be a plus or it can be a minus, and I'll get into that one a little bit later. And also, there are more opportunities for children. Now that we live in a world where it's easy to travel to different places and where it's easy to work within a community, there are many more opportunities available for children to share their knowledge and to learn from others. So those are very good. Now the problems that we see, or that I'm seeing, is very few children are reading for enjoyment these days. I see fewer and fewer children reading, and I hear more and more parents saying that their children just do not like to read. However, I'm also hearing that their children are on their computers a lot. Bullying is a huge problem in our society today. Bullying is occurring in schools. As a matter of fact, I just saw on the news maybe 2 weeks ago that a 13-year-old committed suicide because this child had been bullied. So we need to be very, very aware of that, and we need to be cautious that we're not teaching our children to be aggressive. And bullying also occurs on the internet, and there's a lot of cyberbullying. School shootings is a problem. Somehow we pretend like that's not going to happen in our school, but there was a time when it was such a rare occurrence that we talked about it for years. There at the end of the school year last year, in 2022, in the spring, it was almost a weekly occurrence somewhere in the United States that there was a school shooting. And of course, Uvalde, Texas is very close right now in our minds and hearts. And to have something so horrific happen in the schools, it was unimaginable when my children were in school, and certainly when I was growing up. The morals and values have changed in children in schools, and what our schools are promoting. And that's coming from a number of different things. And for older people, and I'm talking about people my generation and older, that think that there's a quick fix, I'm sorry, unless you have been in the schools day after day, it's not a quick fix. It's not as easy as you think. And that's another video or podcast in the future. The other thing is children today are more insecure, and they are more poorly equipped for the real world than ever before. And there's a number of reasons for this, but think about that as well. And then there's a lack of creativity and imagination. So, with all those problems, and I'm sure that almost everyone that's listening to this today understands and has observed these problems, if not with your children, then with other children that you know. So, I don't think I'm telling you anything that's unusual. So, what is causing this and what is happening to American education that is causing us to go into this decline? Well, there's a number of reasons, and I talk about them in the book. But probably the biggest one is what's now called Common Core. And I'm not going to lay it all at the door of Common Core. However, I am going to lay it at the door of politicians, because education is run by politicians in the United States. It is not run by educators. And even though typically the Secretary of Education has a background in it, the politicians make those decisions, and educators are not free to be a part of it. It's all political, and typically we have a lot of lobbyists that are telling our politicians what they think is best for them. The children are not in the mix. It's more about politicians getting re-elected and serving their agenda. The agenda that children need is not going to be a popular agenda. So let me talk about this. First of all, Common Core was each president or each administration wants education to be one of their big platforms. So Common Core is now holding out for a while, although I expect it to be changed pretty soon because it's been around for a while. But it was developed and created to weed out poor teachers. Now let me tell you something about Common Core. So when it was developed and created, it was created by a group of 27 people with only a few educators, but a significant number from the testing industry. So, and remember, when we talk about lobbyists, they have the ear of the politicians who make the decisions about what's going on within education. And it's a trickle-down effect. No matter how much you think that the teachers have control in the classroom, the teachers are only the puppets that are controlled and told what they can do because their jobs depend on doing what they are told to do. This is a quote from my book, and it says, Common Core standards were marked by the absence of public participation, transparency, or educator participation. There was little transparency about what was going to be in it, how it was created. It was more of the standardized testing people were invited to the table than there were educators. So let's go on to some of the other things. If you were not aware, when children are tested, and Common Core is measured by standardized tests, and we'll get to them in just a minute, and I apologize, I'm getting some little kind of cold or allergy thing, but it focuses on children reading informational books. And even I, we typically do not like to read informational books. They're not the books that we read for pleasure. The books that we read for pleasure are going to be the books that we just want to entertain us. We want to escape the real world through those books. Common Core is testing things that children are reading from informational passages and informational books. The result has been children do not like to read, and there are fewer books read for enjoyment. Teachers do not have the time to read those wonderful classical novels in class and to discuss them because their time is very limited, and it seems like each year there is more put on their plate about what they have got to do. And I'm sorry, I know that my heart is from the heart of a teacher, but you need to understand that teachers have so much on their plate, and they are adding more and more of things that the home should be doing but are not. Okay, so success is measured by standardized testing. Now, standardized testing, this is my issue with it. One of my many issues with it is it expects all children to fit the same mold at the same time. Guys, I am here to tell you, and you know this, that we are not, our brains do not all work on the same level at the same time. Something that clicks with me today may not click with you, or something that you understand, it may take me a few more months to understand that. So to expect me or anyone to have grasped the same information at the same time and can give you back that is just not possible. So we're already expecting the impossible. Now, I have already criticized the politicians, so let me go back and let me give them a little boost here. So the politicians have been given, they have been fed some false information. And this is coming typically from standardized test companies. So what they are told is, if you go through our programs and if you use our test and if you do what we tell you, there is going to be phenomenal growth. And these children are going to understand so much more, and you are going to be the miracle worker. They are making promises that cannot be delivered. Children, the more they are tested, the more frustrated they get. It is not the answer to learning. This is another issue. And so the standardized testing companies are the ones that are benefiting from this, but they're not the only ones. When you think about what we are being fed, and our information is coming from our schools, it is coming from our friends, it is coming from our churches, it is coming from the TV, it is coming from the media, that if we are not on this technology bandwagon, there is something wrong with us and we are hurting our children. And that is false. That is actually the opposite of what is going on. When you think about the technology that's in the United States, that is in the schools and in our homes, think about that. We have spent a tremendous amount of money to get all of this going. Well, when you think about the infrastructure, and by that I'm talking about the wiring and the internet that is put into the schools, when you think about the devices and the computers and the programs that are loaded into it, not to mention how often these things need to be replaced, that is a huge chunk of one segment of our economy. And so to say, or to at this point say, that didn't work, it's not going to happen, folks. We are never, in the United States, going to admit that technology was not the cure-all for children. And my information is not coming just from me. It is a lot of research, and please, in my book, and I will show this one more time, in my book, I have a huge number of references, and I encourage you to look those up. Do not just rely on what I'm telling you. Go and look at these sources and do your own research. Okay. Another problem that I'm seeing, kindergartners. Kindergartners, I had a number of conversations with a kindergarten teacher my last year in education. And this poor teacher, she and I looked at what these children were expected to do and know as kindergartners. Guys, that's not the way our brains work. That's not the way God created our brains. Children have developing brains. They need to be curious. They need to question things. They need to check things out for themselves. They need to learn for themselves how to get along. Kindergarten is the wonderful opportunity for children to make up rules to their own games. And when you watch, if you've ever watched a group of preschoolers or kindergartners, they are awesome for making up games, and they will make them up and they will make up the rules. And then if someone doesn't like a rule, then they will find a way to compromise to make another rule. Guys, this is so important, but we're taking that out. We are just removing that from their lives because we want to test them. That is so wrong. We need to give them that time to explore and to learn and to play dress up, to decide what it is that parents do, what it is that a doctor does. From that dress up, just imagine if a child were dressing up as a doctor. They had just been to a doctor's appointment. They use their imagination to decide what that doctor has done, how that doctor dresses, and what is important about that doctor. They have spent a lot of time observing that doctor in the doctor's office. And by the way, guys, if they're playing on a cell phone when they're waiting for that doctor, they're not observing everything that's there in that room where the doctor in the examination room, they're not observing all those instruments and the charts and the pictures on the walls. You have robbed them of a wonderful opportunity to learn by sticking a silly cell phone in front of them. Okay, now we also need to realize that one of the problems with Common Core and standardized testing is children are only tested on what can be easily regurgitated and what can be tested. There is no way that they can test creativity and imagination. Also, the brain needs, this is probably one of my biggest frustrations, is the brain development of children. I have not seen that in any of my research for how education is run. The more I read about brain development, the more I see that our education system has not even addressed that, has not even considered that. So one of the things that our brain needs is it needs some downtime. It does not need all this busy stuff. The brain cannot process, and especially a young child cannot process all these little, animated characters going right in front of them at a fast pace. An adult brain, yes, but children have developing brains. They need time to look at something and to process what that is. So that's one of the things. Also, boredom. Boredom is wonderful for children, and parents have decided that that's not good, that If your child is bored, then that's not good and they're going to get in trouble. Parents, let them be bored. Let them find a way to entertain themselves. That will help them to be smarter, because the brain needs that time, that downtime. It needs that time to rest. Just like other parts of our body needs time to rest, the brain needs that as well. Okay, let me switch now. I think that's about all I'm going to say about Common Core for today. Not to say that I won't address it again at some point in the future. But let me talk about standardized testing. One of the big problems I've seen with standardized testing, with parents, with social media, with technology, is we have decided that this is bragging rights. We have decided that our children have to score that 4 on some EOG or a 3 something on EOG. All of a sudden, average is not good. Guys, don't do that, and don't do that to your children. All you should ask of your children is to do their very best. Don't put all that stress and pressure on your kids that they have got to be perfect. No one can be perfect at everything. You can't, so don't do that to your children. Being perfect is not realistic, and all that's doing is adding insecurity, it's adding pressure, and it's making children feel like that there is something lacking in them if they are not perfect. For parents, oh boy, that's bragging rights. My child is smarter than yours. Get over it, parents. Stop that. You are hurting your children. Put your children above your own ego. Sorry, that's just the way I feel about that. As I said before, these testing companies have come up with some empty promises that the more kids are tested, the better they are going to be. The other thing you need to realize is these tests were created by testing companies. Now, I have had sometimes that testing companies have reached out and wanted to know if I wanted to submit some questions. But overall, the testing companies decide which questions are going to be on their test and what the choices for the answers are. Also, guys, all they're looking for is a multiple choice answer. They're not looking for anything with a thought process. What this does is it adds money for the testing companies. The more tests they can produce, the more money they can make. However, it promotes teaching to the test, And by the way, Common Core and standardized testing was developed for a way to weed out bad teachers. It was never intended as a way to improve education, although that's the assumption that we have made. And so what it does is it causes the teachers to teach to the test, because a lot of times their jobs depend on it. And as parents, let's not let that standardized testing develop that yardstick that we measure our children by. And just because our kids are not doing good in something today doesn't make them learning disabled or something else. We're putting too many labels on our kids today when immaturity is part of it, and so is self-discipline. But that's a whole different thing. Okay, let me also, right now, I think I am going to read a verse to you. I've got this written down. Yes. It says, and this is Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 through 4. And if you ever buy one of my books and I sign it, I always put this in there. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interest, but also to the interest of others. Guys, let's stop this bragging. God does not look favorably on the proud. Let's become humble and let's look more toward others than to ourselves. Sorry about that noise in the background there. So let me tell you some of the myths. And by the way, if you didn't see my last video, I would encourage you to watch something called The Social Dilemma, and that was on Netflix the last time that I checked, but if it's not, you can probably find it on YouTube. But The Social Dilemma is people from Silicon Valley. These are people that have worked in the technology industry that are now letting people know the problems and the concerns. They are the whistleblowers that are really worried about what this is doing to our children and to our society. With that said, let me just throw in a couple more things before I get too far ahead of myself. First of all, this is my whole thing with education. We have decided that technology is the cure-all for everything, that it is our miracle drug. It is not. As a matter of fact, it is our poison that we are now using. And since I've said that, I'm not anti-technology. I think technology is wonderful. I think it's a wonderful tool for adults. As far as it being a tool for education, it would be very, 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 very limited as far as I can tell from the research I have been doing and from the way that our society is going down as one of the leaders in education. Also, I just read a report recently that even though a lot of people are applying to our Ivy League schools like Duke and Harvard and schools like that, the graduates are becoming more and more people that are not from the United States, because people in the United States, there are just not that many that are equipped because we are not self-disciplined. When I say that, this is my big concern. If I want to put something in bold, and at some point I will do this, education is not entertainment. We have decided that children learn when they are being entertained. No, they don't. They might watch something and they might tell you something, but 10 minutes from now, they have probably forgotten it. And if you ask them 2 weeks from now, it's so far in the past because there are so many other things. It never had time to sink in and for them to process it. Education is not entertainment, and we don't want it to be. I do not want the doctor that's performing surgery on me to have watched several videos and now they have the artificial intelligence where they can, manipulate some of that. And I think that's probably a good tool for adults and for that, for surgeons. But I want a doctor that has studied the books, that knows the drugs that needs to be administered. I want someone that has taken the time to do the work to know what to do. All right, there's another myth, and this one is the one that's probably circulated the most. And it says that our children will not be prepared for the future if we do not immerse them in technology when they're young. And that is simply not so, and I am reading that from a number of people in Silicon Valley. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking that one of those quotes is from someone at Google. And this is the problem, and this is what parents have not been told. if you think about how technology has evolved in the last 10 and 20 years, all right, a child that is in elementary school now, in 10 to 20 years, the way technology looks now is going to be different. So instead of teaching them technology and letting them play with this, let's teach them how to think, how to research, and how to use what they have learned. Then 10 to 20 years from now, they can get into the technology and use what they have learned. But if they never learn how to research and how to think and how to question, then all they're going to be able to do is regurgitate, like I said, what they've learned. Now, interestingly enough, the parents from Silicon Valley, let me tell you about them. And these are the people that are promoting this, that are creating the apps, that are creating the technology, that are working for the big technology companies. A big majority of them are sending their children to schools like Waldorf. And if you have never heard of a Waldorf school, there are several throughout the country. Those schools do not allow technology until the children are at least 14 years old. They, most of them actually have parents sign something saying that their children will not be using technology at home and will not be exposed to it at home. The people at Silicon Valley know the dangers of technology and know children learn better. We need to start listening to the people that have created this monster. We need to start looking at what they're doing. And guess what? They are not as influenced by peer pressure because they know and they're willing for their children to be the elite and be different. And by the way, those Waldorf students, when I have read the research about that, around third grade, if they took a standardized test, they would probably not do well because the standardized test is not testing the way they are teaching. However, by the time they graduate and take an SAT, their scores are very high and most are prepared for Ivy League schools. They're not worried about this. They're more worried about their brains and how they function. Please watch The Social Dilemma. Now, let me tell you one more thing, and I hope this will be another eye-opener. Politicians do not send their kids to schools with Common Core and standardized testing. As a matter of fact, a number of politicians that live in Washington, including the Obamas and the Biden's grandchildren, they have sent their children to something called Sidwell Friends, which is a Quaker school, and that school has no standardized test, and again, they have a system of learning that promotes thinking and imagination. We need, it's amazing that the things that they have mandated for us, they did not use for their own children. We need to stop and consider that. Our children are not an experiment. They are not willing to risk their children. We shouldn't be risking our children. Okay, so what should we do? We need to stop worrying about what other people are doing. We need to stop worrying about what the media is feeding us. We need to look at what is best for our children and stop bragging. Get away from that. God resists the proud. Oh, one other thing I wanted to tell you too. So when these people from the testing companies come to the schools and they want to present that they have the best new program or something for the school and their research shows it. Well, their research might show it because their research was done by their own industry or by someone that was paid by their industry or that had something to gain from skewing the results. Independent research that has nothing to gain has shown that children do not do well with these tests. By the way, I have been attending a number of homeschool conferences, and I meet a lot of the people that are selling their wares, and of course there's a lot of people selling computer programs and ways for children to learn. And at my last one, I met a gentleman who came up to me and he wanted me to see his new reading program. And it was something that was completely, put the children on the computer and walk away and they're going to come back geniuses. And I said, so what research shows that? And he just said, well, they're better readers. And again, I asked him that again, and he just said, well, they're better readers or their own company has proved it or something. Guys, a child being able to read a word doesn't mean that they have comprehended what they have read. We need to slow down, take it back a notch, and stop getting swept up in this web that is telling us how to raise our children. And then let me end it with one thing, one more Bible verse, and that says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. We need to be preparing our children for heaven. We need to be teaching them to be givers instead of takers. We need to be preparing them to use whatever education they have for God's kingdom. There are so many ways that all these jobs and stuff, from attorneys to doctors, all of these things can be used to serve the kingdom of God. We need to stop worrying about how we can brag to our neighbors that we've got a new car or a big house or that we wear fine clothes. That's not going to matter at all when we enter the kingdom of God. Christians, I pray that you will take heart in this, and if you're not a Christian, I pray that you will ask Jesus into your heart. Thank you so much for listening today. And please subscribe to my channel. I am trying my very best to bring a new book every week to you, just to share what I am reading and what I am studying. Have a great day and a great week, and I hope to see you next week. God bless.